Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the webinar. For those of you who I haven't met in person, my name is Fred Pitsadney. I'm the founder and president of Focus Management, and I'll be presenting today's session along with Richard Jarosky, a Focus partner. Just a couple of housekeeping items first. Feel free to take notes during this webinar. However, you should know that we're recording today's webinar and it will be sent to you in a couple of days. Secondly, we will be using the Q&A feature to capture any questions that you would like to have answered. So please enter your questions in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. We set some time aside following the presentation and we'll get to as many questions as we can. 8 months ago, the tone and the subject matter for this webinar would have been so different. The focus would have been on planning how to successfully scale the next peak off in the distance. That peak represented the goals for the business. But then, with little warning, everything changed. In the space of a few short months, the COVID outbreak turned our world upside down. Our choices, our options have become severely limited. Now, we all have to act very, very quickly and decisively and respond to changes that come at us just about every day as we move towards a new normal, whatever that might become. To survive and thrive in today's unsettling and turbulent environment, we all need to rethink how we approach planning, managing, and executing our critical priorities. We need to take the tools that we are familiar with and reshape them to fit the world we now find ourselves in. And how has that world changed? Well, for starters, it shut down. Planes stopped flying. Borders were closed. People returning home from abroad were either placed in quarantine or voluntarily into self-isolation. You couldn't go where you wanted to. If you did, you couldn't get back. Buyers couldn't buy. Sellers couldn't sell. Shippers couldn't ship. Makers couldn't make. Every economy, everywhere, took a severe blow to the head. And on top of all of this, we don't know what's coming next. We are now in the second wave. Is there another? How much longer for a vaccine? What about an antiviral? When will it be safe to go back to something we used to call normal? This pandemic is crushing many paradigms, how we make purchases and what we buy, how we do business and who we do it with, how our businesses operate internally, how we communicate with each other, and the list goes on. In the face of this, we need to recognize an important reality. Whoever acts the fastest and most decisively will set the pace. And to do this, we need to rethink our approach to planning. In fact, to a great degree, we need to rethink how we think, and especially how we think about planning. So what are the goals today? Well, there are 3 of them, which are designed to provide you with a guide or a roadmap on how you can adapt your planning toolkit to today's realities. The overall goal is to introduce the RAD process that we have successfully used with our clients. We'll start by reviewing the underlying key principles that will help you move quickly through your planning and execution stages. And we'll introduce you to some specific tools and techniques that are immensely helpful in today's turbulent and uncertain world. Let's start where RAD came from, the fundamental value proposition for all the work, and then we'll cover the 4 principles, the tools and techniques, the how-tos, and RAD's fit. I mean, who stands to benefit the most for taking the RAD approach? Every leader, whether of a business unit or a team within, wants the great execution of what matters most. The great execution, however, remains elusive, as most, in fact, it's been published that 75% still struggle with the execution of not only strategic, but operational and project plans. So where do organizations end up? Well, often it's one of these other quadrants. Let's start with the orange quadrant, the poor execution of what matters most. This is where you find leaders with lots of frustration, great frustration, who keep asking, why are we late? Why we miss the time deadlines again? Why are there so many errors? Why? Well, you get the idea. The green quadrant, the great execution of the wrong things often leads to major embarrassment as the leader answers questions like, look, if we're so great at getting things done, why is the competition still eating our lunch? Why have we missed our fundraising goal? You get the idea. The black zone is that color for a reason. Businesses and their leaders just don't last very long. Poor execution of the wrong things is a major reason that the majority of startups never see year 2. There are 3 elements that help leaders take their teams to that top right-hand quadrant. They are clarity, alignment, and commitment. Well, of what exactly? For strategy execution, it's clarity, alignment, and commitment to the long-term focus and direction of the business. Today, it's about identifying the critical priorities, what we need to do to survive, and for some, is how to deal with unusually big demands for products and services. The bottom axis is about ensuring clarity, alignment, and commitment to action for individual accountabilities. Not being clear and empowered to take action or to make decisions is, according to published studies and our own 50 years of combined experience with 400 organizations, the #1 blockage to great execution. We'll be addressing how to fix that during this webinar. Okay, so you have this nice diagram that says GEM, which is the fundamental value proposition. It's all about getting the great execution of what matters most. When you add a good dose of speed and agility to accommodate the craziness of this marketplace, now things are changing so quickly, you get the rapid agile deployment, right? RAD for short. So for the next 30 minutes or so, we're going to focus on the 4 principles that you can use to catch the wave and not be crushed beneath it. These 4 principles will be supported by 6 specific techniques and tools. Let's overview the principles first. First of all, engage your people in the process of planning and deploying your plan, and do it early. You know, we've heard a lot of talk about employee engagement over the last decade. Mostly empty words, as most organizations are not really doing a better job at it than they were at the turn of the century. Not when it comes to real, meaningful engagement. Quickly means quickly, not weeks or months like we were used to in strategy work, right? We're talking about days. Power through execution by doing a few critical processes and doing them right and doing them over and over again. Planning sessions should be short bursts, 1 to 2 hours, like 90 minutes is a good target, not 1 or 2 days as we're accustomed to. You've all heard the saying, no plan survives the first engagement with the enemy, or variations on that theme. Well, it's more than a truism. A plan that fails to address the rapidly changing realities on the ground is worse than useless. It's downright dangerous. Agility and responsiveness will rule. The 4th and final principle, nothing stops a great plan achieving the success it deserves more than people charged with its execution only having a vague, fuzzy idea of the authority that they have to make decisions and to get important stuff done. We're going to cover how to fix that today. So those are the 4 principles. Let's dig into each one of them and put some meat on the bones. There are 2 important reasons to ask your people about their views and their ideas. The first is that they want to be asked. They want to feel that someone actually cares about what they think. I mean, in their position, wouldn't you? The second reason is they know things that you don't, not because they're necessarily smarter, but because they are often closer to the action, closer to customers, closer with suppliers and competitors. Look, the last thing you want to hear during a debrief, especially of a failed initiative, is, I could have told you that. You never, ever want to hear those words. It only makes sense that if you ask questions, you need to listen to the answers. Nothing turns people off more than taking the trouble to respond to a question only to be totally ignored. Most of us have had that experience. It's not pleasant. This must not happen. It's critical to respond in some fashion about the entire process. Ask people early enough in the process to make their input useful. This is during the assessment stage, prior to putting pen to paper and creating the plan to take the business forward. This should be one of the very, very first things that you do. There are a variety of tools, many available at low cost, that can be used to gather this input. SurveyMonkey is one, and there are others. Keep it simple. Don't make it too elaborate or complicated. Ask a few vital questions and make it clear as to why the answers matter. We're going to look at a couple of examples in just a minute. Whatever information you gather, it needs to feed into your battle planning. Now, why do we call it battle planning? Well, for us, it conveys a completely different level of intensity than conventional strategic planning. This isn't about winning the war. It is about achieving the success we need today that creates a secure and positive tomorrow. The first thing that we need to do is quickly come to grips with the situation we find ourselves in, particularly in 5 key areas of importance. First of all, what is life like today for our customers? How are they being affected? How are their attitudes, their preferences, and behaviors changing? What new challenges are they having that might represent opportunities for us? Maybe their need for what we do is decreased, or maybe it's increased due to the present situation. You know, for instance, the dramatic drop in commercial and civil aviation has had a terrible impact on companies that service and repair aircraft components such as wheels and brakes. Sailmakers, on the other hand, who had the capability, have gained from the surge in demand for covers to protect engines as aircraft sit idle. What about our suppliers? We depend on them to operate our business. So how are they holding up? Do we need to be looking for alternatives? We can't afford to have a supply chain that is unreliable due to capacity constraints. As borders close, many experience logistical nightmares and still haven't been able to establish a secure supply of materials and components. As for our competitors, are they showing any signs of weakness that we can exploit? Have their service levels dropped significantly? Are they losing customers? Is there a fire sale opportunity out there? Maybe we can snap up some smaller companies that are struggling so that we can expand our reach. If we don't, someone else might. One of our clients, a maker of plumbing products, experienced a huge increase in demand for their products because many of their competitors were either unable to operate or have their supply chains disrupted. Their big challenge, and put this under a nice problem to have, was how are we going to make enough of our product quickly enough to take advantage of this windfall? What about our people? How are they doing? This has been a very stressful time for many, perhaps all. Are we doing what we can to help them through this? For example, one of our clients shifted work hours to help those who are having difficulty managing childcare. Finally, we need to appraise our operational capability and capacity. Are we able to meet service level requirements and remain cost efficient? If we have excess capacity, can it be redeployed to other areas? I mean, look at the example. Look at the number of companies now making respirators and masks. Remember the survey I mentioned a few minutes ago? Well, these are a few of the questions that we ask. What one thing within our power? Don't ask questions that you can't do anything about. So what one thing within our power could we do to help you and others deal with and cope better? The first thing you need to do is ask your people, how can we help you? How about our customers? What can we do to serve them better? After all, a business without customers, well, it just isn't. What ideas do you have on how we could bond better with them? Perhaps become the trusted go-to company, maybe even indispensable. We might be suffering operationally and our less than great performance is damaging our reputation and causing frustration. How can we address those concerns and get better? The answers you receive need to be sifted, sorted, collated, organized, and analyzed. Look for the nuggets, especially those that might seem at first glance to be kind of a little off the page. Include those nuggets in the conversation you have with your core planning team. Set a very small number of objectives. I reinforce this because, you know, Richard and I have done a lot of planning in a lot of different client situations, and typically they end up with these large laundry lists of objectives. But what you want to do is set a very small number of objectives whose achievement will make a significant impact on the business. Make sure they are both clear on what they are and why they matter, and make them as measurable as possible so you can track your progress towards them. Something like this: increase full order on-time shipment to 96% by December 31st, time-bounded, without increasing per unit shipping costs. This objective not only drives increased internal efficiency, it also benefits the customer. It's a win-win. Do it quickly. You've heard this, say that before. We'll be saying it again. Do it quickly. It's about speed. Lean towards action rather than deep contemplation. We need to spend more time in planning sessions on creating action plans. Make your planning sessions short, 1 to 2 hours. 90 minutes is a nice target. And place them at a tight timeline, whatever you can accommodate. Think about doing 2 or even 3 sessions in a week during the assessment and planning stages. Please keep it simple. Keeping it simple should be your mantra throughout this process. I mean, a beautiful plan on paper breaks down if people aren't clear on what they need to do and how the various elements need to fit together to be successful. In a moment, we'll look at some powerful yet simple ways of ensuring clarity of your plan. The most common cause, I'll repeat that, the most common cause of execution failure is that people don't know specifically what is expected of them, what they're supposed to do, or the authority that's available to them. We're going to cover more about authority clarification in a few minutes. Complexity is a major barrier when it comes to deciding what to do and then executing it. Richard is going to cover some simple yet very powerful tools and techniques that you can use. The best thing is that you probably already have them in your toolkit. Richard will include how to make the planning and execution roles crystal clear. Richard, over to you.
Thanks, Fred, and good morning, everyone. Now, Fred has given you some nice background, sort of set the context for RAD, especially within sort of the times that we're experiencing today. And what I want to do is a couple of things. One of those is to talk a little bit more about how RAD actually works. So if you sort of lift the covers off and look underneath, in a little bit more detail, what does it look like? And I also want to talk about some of the tools and the techniques that our clients have found really, really helpful. And these are some things that in some cases we've been using since, well, forever. But in other cases, we've sort of tuned and in some cases even developed them newly, simply because they really suit the times and they suit the design of RAD. So the first part of RAD, the cycle, the process, is getting ready. Essentially, it says if we want to sit down, whether it's virtually or physically together, and develop a plan, we need to make sure that we're ready to do that. And there are really 4 things involved in doing this. And one of those is to figure out who's going to be doing the planning. So within the organization, are we talking about the senior management team? Is it the senior management team plus some other individuals? Is it a diagonal slice? Is it a function? Whatever the case, it needs to be really clear who's going to be on the team. And then we need to orient those folks and help them just sort of get up to speed in terms of what we're going to be doing. Then the second thing is to identify which employees we're going to survey. Now, in a smaller organization, maybe anywhere from 10 to perhaps a few hundred employees, the answer might be, well, let's survey everybody because we want to give everyone the opportunity to provide some input. In larger organizations, the decision might be to maybe segment it or only focus on certain areas or do it by level. But whatever the case, we need to make sure that we identify those folks because the next thing we need to do is actually send out the survey. And we do this early so that we have the data available to us when the team gets together to start working through the planning process. So we need to distribute the surveys, we need to get the responses back, compile them, do some analysis, and then feed that back to the core planning team along with their pre-work for the assessment phase. Now, this is about 5 days of activity, and it's typically done a week prior to the initiation. Well, now we're going to want to get down to starting the planning process. The first thing that we need to do is do a bit of an assessment. Like Fred said earlier, what's going on among our customers, our suppliers, our competitors. Now, we established 3 work sessions to do the assessment in. And a work session, as we've said already, is a short session, typically somewhere between 1 hour and 2 hours. And again, sort of the target is about 90 minutes in length, typically close together. So the first of these sessions looks outside the organization, outside the business, at those key entities, our customers, those who supply us, as well as our competitors. The second session, then we look inside the organization and look at our people, look at ourselves operationally and try to understand what's going on there. Where are the pain points? Where are the pressure points? Where are the opportunities? And how big and small are they relative to each other? Because ultimately, we've got to figure out of that long list of things that we've talked about through that assessment so far, what are the most important? What should be the critical few priorities that we need to talk more about? Well, this is days 1 to 5 of the RAD cycle. So if it started on Monday, then essentially by Friday, we've completed the assessment activity. And now we've got sort of the finger on the pulse. We've got a sense of what's going on outside and inside, and we've decided what needs to drive the conversation as we move into the next phase. And the next phase, of course, is planning. Now, during the planning phase, there are 3 work sessions here. And the first of those is to say, well, we're going to create a plan, but any plan that's worth anything needs to be focused on achieving some kind of outcome, some kind of goals or objectives. So that's where we start. And we talk about near horizon objectives. These are not strategic goals that might look out 2, 3, and even 5 years. These are near horizon objectives that might be only 3 months out, maybe 6 months out. This again is about battle planning. It's not strategic planning. It's not about winning the war. It's about figuring out what we need to do to be successful, and in some cases, even to survive over this next short period of time. Well, having established the objectives, then we got to figure out, well, what needs to get done in order for us to accomplish those things. So we need to identify what could we do, and then work that down to the things that will be done. We need to select those initiatives. And then finally, we need to establish the leadership or ownership for each of them. There's got to be someone who's going to carry the ball for each of those key initiatives going forward. Well, having done that, then we come to the question of resources, because if I've taken responsibility for an initiative and I charge off along the way and I go to do things, it's quite possible I'm going to encounter a situation where I say, you know what, I don't have what I need in order to be successful here. And it's going to slow me down. It puts the initiative at risk. The other thing is that I need to have the right level of authority. I need to be able to do things. I need to be allowed to do things without having to constantly check, ask, beg. I need to be able to move forward as well as I can and as quickly as I can in order to be successful. Because if not, then we're going to have problems. Well, this is days 8 to 15. So think of this as essentially week 2 of the RAD cycle. And at this point, we've got the plan. We've got clear measures of success. We've established objectives. And we've got ownership for initiatives as well as authority established for those things as well. Well, let me introduce you now to a couple of tools and techniques that our clients find are really, really helpful, particularly during the RAD process and in any sense during these times. And the first of those is something that we call the 3W chart. And the 3 Ws, well, they talk about the what, the who, and the when. And this is simply a pretty simple tool for capturing, in essence, the plan. What needs to get done, who needs to ensure it gets done, and the time by when it's expected to be completed. So that's the simple 3W. Now, in some cases, the team will have a discussion, a bit of a debate around, who is the who? And the conclusion they reach is, well, making the decision, that's really a joint effort. Robin and Tony really need to do that together. And our counterpoint to that is, absolutely, it sounds like they both need to be involved. However, which of the two is going to be accountable for ensuring that it actually does happen? So they reach that conclusion, and we indicate that with an asterisk, a very simple way of saying, okay, this is the person who's accountable for ensuring that that action is taken. Now, some clients say, that's great, the 3 Ws, but there's other information that we'd like to capture and record as well as that. So great. We say, well, what do you need to add? Well, resources, that's a common one. It says for each of those initiatives, those action items to be executed successfully, there might be some additional resources that are required. Those might be people, might be technology, might be funding, who knows? The important thing is that it's captured here and that it's not forgotten. Now, the information on the 3W chart can be maintained in an Excel spreadsheet. Some clients choose to put it into a project management application because that's what they use to manage their project. And we say, great, just take the information, move it over, and manage it there. So that's the 3W. Here's another really useful tool that our clients find particularly helpful in terms of managing the dynamics of their planning team and ensuring that they are crisp, their meetings are crisp and efficient and productive, because as Fred said, this is about, leaning towards action rather than deep contemplation and long conversations. So the first of those says, make your point, do it quickly. Not go on and on and on, but in fact, get it out quickly. Let's do something with it, and then let's move on. The second rule of engagement, close is good enough for now. Teams often get caught up in trying to arrive at the perfect answer, the most precise calculation of whatever. And the fact is that often that's not time well spent. What they need to settle for is something that's pretty close, for now at least, and that should give us a sense of whether it's important or not, or how good an initiative might be for us to carry forward. Keeping focused, not sidetracking, again, huge potential for taking up time, which is better spent doing other things. Can use a parking lot to track these things to make sure that we don't forget about them, but let's not pursue that right now. It might be important, but it's not timely. Having one speaker, these days doing meetings virtually and online, if you've got more than one person talking at a time, it becomes really, really difficult to follow the conversation. I'm not sure who I should be listening to, and that's true whether I'm a facilitator of that meeting or whether I'm one of the meeting participants. And then finally, the 80% rule. And the 80% rule recognizes that every conversation and every decision-making process reaches a point of diminishing returns. At some point, it becomes clear that we haven't added any real value to the conversation for the last several minutes. We keep talking about the same stuff the same way. So someone within that meeting needs to be able to simply put up their hand and say, you know what, I think we're at least 80% there. And the team can reflect on that for a second and hopefully come to the conclusion that, yeah, you know what, I think we're done. So let's recognize it, capture it, whether it's a decision, an action item, a conclusion, whatever it might be, and then let's move on. So again, these rules of engagement, which fit the motif of battle planning, if you will, we often call them ground rules or meeting rules of order or whatever the case. Very helpful these days, especially given that we're trying to accomplish quite a bit in short periods of time. Here's another technique. It's got a bit of a playful name. We call it Spitball decision making. And this is not the illegal pitch in baseball. This is more along the lines of let's throw things against the wall and see what sticks. And it simply recognizes the fact that whatever the objective might be, there are going to be a lot of ways that we could go about achieving it. Lots of possibilities. So how do we go from a long list to a much shorter list? Well, here's a pretty simple way to do just that. Now, this particular example puts value or benefit on the vertical axis and cost or effort along the horizontal axis, and it basically creates 4 zones. And let me go through them with you. Let's start with the best deal zone, the green. The best deal zone is things that they're going to pay off really nicely. And the even better news is they're going to take relatively little effort or not cost very much to implement. You'd have trouble convincing me that those things are not good to do. We've got the justifiable zone, the blue zone. Now, the blue zone are things that are going to give us a pretty good return. On the other hand, they're also going to take a fair bit of effort or cost to implement. So it might be justifiable. And I think particularly we look there when there's not very much over in the green zone. And we say, well, if there's not much in the green, let's look a little bit harder at those justifiable items. We've got the why bother zone, the lower left, which is yellow, that says, you know, it's not going to cost very much, but on the other hand, it's not going to give us much back either. So I'm not sure that we would bother. And then finally, the no way zone. These are things that they're going to cost a lot to do, and they're not going to give us very much back. That just does not sound like a sound thing to do. So sorry, but no way. Now, of course, in the middle, as always in life, we've got that gray maybe zone. These are things that we're just not sure about. I mean, we might need a little bit more time spent on analyzing them, looking at them, probing and figuring out where to put them. And the idea being that ultimately, whatever those ideas are, whatever those possibilities might be, we plot them somehow on this grid. Now, I'll give you an example. We have a client that put together a team that they wanted to do some improvements on the shop floor of their business. And they assembled a team together and they did some brainstorming, which made a lot of sense, of course. And naturally, as brainstorming often does, it yielded a very long list of things that they could do. And of course, they stood back and looked at the list, and there were 130 something items on that list. And they said, well, a couple of things. One is, that's way too many things. We couldn't possibly do all of those. The other thing was that they're not all created equal. I mean, some of those are probably really good ideas, good things to do, and others are probably not so great to do. And we need to figure out which is which. So they did a round of spitballing, and they took that 130 items and they worked it down to a much smaller list. Well, they looked at that list and they said, no, guess what? It's still too long. There are still too many things. We can't possibly do all those, and we probably shouldn't even do all of them. So they did a second round of spitballing, took that shorter list down to a very short, tight list, and they said, you know what? Those are the things that we're going to do, and now they're executing and implementing those ideas. So again, and this is a simple illustration of spitballing with, you know, cost and benefit, or cost, effort, and value benefit. You could also do one that has a sort of cost benefit versus risk, and say, well, let's look at risk in relation to what it's going to give us in return for what we spend, and do the analysis that way. So however you do it, again, it can yield, the whole point being, take a long list of ideas, work that down to a shorter list, and say, you know what, those look like the things that we should pursue. Well, great. So now you've chosen what to do. We're into the deployment phase. We're doing stuff. The next point, and this is the next principle involved in RAD, is keeping agile and maintaining some level of responsiveness in an organization. And the key here is checking on progress often. And this might mean, for instance, doing short check-ins, 5, 10, 15 minutes, several times a week during the deployment of the plan. You know, it's a little bit like driving in traffic. You can't just drive along with your eyes closed and occasionally open your eyes to see how things are going, or not look at the gas gauge other than maybe every few days. You know, we need to get that feedback and check on progress and see how things are going fairly often. We need to change the plan if it's not working. You know, the quote that's attributed to Einstein, which is that doing the same thing repeatedly and expecting a different outcome is the definition of insanity. Well, whether he said it or not, whoever said it has a good point. If something's not working, then we need to figure out, well, is it the wrong thing, or are we not doing it the right way? So let's come to the right conclusion there, and if necessary, change the plan. And then this idea of calling it audible. Now, we take this idea from North American football. So the scenario that we're all familiar with, the quarterback and the offensive team are in the huddle, the quarterback calls a play, they break the huddle, they go to the line of scrimmage and line up, they go down in the line, center goes down over the ball, quarterback looks over the center at the alignment of the defense and concludes very quickly, oh my gosh, that play is absolutely the wrong play to run. If we do that, we're going to get hammered. And not only is it not going to work, but it could put us in real trouble. So the quarterback calls an audible. Quarterback uses some coded language because it doesn't want the other team to know what's going on. And essentially says, hey guys, the play that we were going to do, we're not going to do that now. We're now going to do this other play. So two important things about calling an audible. One is that everybody hears it. and you'll hear, even in a crowded and very noisy stadium, that quarterback's voice loud and fairly clear. The second thing is that everybody now knows, everybody on the field knows what they need to do different or do differently. And those are both really critical things about calling an audible. Well, let me move on to the fourth principle that Fred mentioned earlier, which is delegating authority. And for us, there were a few key things here. One is that people have sufficient authority to be effective and to be efficient. And we use the word requisite often, meaning not too little, not too much, but just right, sort of the Goldilocks position, being specific and clear. Like Fred said earlier, a huge problem when people are tasked with doing something but not given the right authority or not really understanding what authority they've got. And the third point, which is about increasing authority when we have the opportunity to give people greater authority because it allows them to do things more efficiently and more quickly. Well, we often use an equation when we talk about authority, and it's responsibility without authority results in frustration. If I've taken accountability for implementing an initiative or achieving an objective, and I go to do it and I find that I am hampered by not having enough authority, I get frustrated. And chances are the next time somebody looks for a volunteer to do something like that, I'm going to take a step back because I've learned that it's just frustrating and it's uncomfortable for me. And quite honestly, it might cause that initiative to fail, which could put me at risk and could put the business at risk as well. Similar equation, which is that responsibility without authority can result in delays as well. So not just frustration, but in fact, the time that it takes to get things done can be stretched out well past the expected timelines. Well, when we define authority, we like to keep it pretty simple, and we use 4 levels. Think of these as sort of authority buckets. The level 1 that says, just do it. For these things, if I'm the team leader, I say to you, hey, you know what? Don't need to ask, don't need to tell, just go ahead and do it. Level 2 that says, yeah, do it, but tell me after. And it's not a courtesy, it's an obligation. A level 3, which is tell me before you do it. And a level 4, which is never mind, bring to me a suggestion, a recommendation, and then I will make the decision, I will make the choice. I think maybe an example will help to clarify this. So here's a situation where a manager is responsible for implementing some changes on the shop floor of a manufacturing operation. Well, the first example, this is pretty simple, really. Spend what's been approved, follow the policies, pretty vanilla. This is the level 1. It says, just go do it. There's no need to ask or tell. The second example about approving new suppliers says that if you're going to approve new suppliers, as your team leader, I need to know about that. Because if somebody comes to me in the hallway and says, hey, what's going on with the suppliers? I don't want to be embarrassed by the fact that I don't know the answer to that. So you need to tell me after you've done it. For changes that are going to have some minor staff impact, I probably want you to tell me first. And then finally, those things that are going to have significant staff impact, I want you to come to me and say what you think we ought to do. And then ultimately, I'm going to make the decision. and you may be the one to implement it at that point. So again, these authority levels can be used on a project basis to focus on authority within an initiative to get certain things done, but they can also be used to establish authority in the day-to-day as part of someone's basic role description. They got certain things they need to get done, they have objectives to accomplish, and aligned with those, they would have the authority statements that make it really clear to them what they're allowed to do in addition to what they're expected to do. I'm going to turn it back over to Fred now, who's going to take us through to the end of the presentation. Fred?
Thanks, Richard. So how does RAD fit in today's COVID world? Leaders from all walks of life are feeling pretty darn frustrated about how fast things are changing. They're worried and often uncertain about what they should be doing and how to do it. They ask questions like, what are my critical priorities? And what should I be doing about them so that what matters most today gets done and gets done quickly? And this is exactly what the RAD approach delivers. You know, when you combine the great execution of what matters most on the left-hand side, right? You add the speed and agility, you get RAD. Okay, so those who would like some professional guidance to implement RAD in their organization, here's the cost for hands-on, step-by-step, let's avoid the landmines facilitation of RAD. For the basic RAD package, which includes first the survey administration, the analysis, and the reporting. Second is getting the core team ready to start. Next are the 6 working sessions delivered according to the schedule developed by the core planning team. And then 1 checkpoint meeting to provide a template for use for subsequent checkpoint meetings. The full, no surprises price is $15,000 to $18,000 plus applicable taxes. This is for a completely virtual process. The $3,000 price range is to accommodate survey administration, which is a function of the number of employees. Okay, so that's the end of the presentation. Let's take a few minutes to answer any questions that may have come through. Richard, do we have any?
As a matter of fact, Fred, we do. We have 1 question, and the question is, does RAD replace strategic planning, or should it complement and fit alongside strategic planning?
Okay, well, let me say this in no uncertain words. RAD does not replace strategic planning. You need that. You need that long-term direction that says, here's where the organization is going. RAD is designed to look at today's situation and say, with all those changes out there, what do we need to do today to survive and perhaps even thrive, as some of the companies I mentioned to earlier? But you want to have that long-term direction in view. And in fact, there are some things that you may learn during the RAD survey process and the situational analysis process that may influence where you're going long-term. The other thing that our clients are finding useful is that some of the tools and techniques that we're using during RAD in terms of some of the ground rules, spitball decision-making, et cetera, are equally as applicable in strategic planning. But let me say again that RAD is not designed at all to replace strat planning. In fact, it's designed to work in concert with. So hopefully that answers the question. It's a good one, by the way. Thank you for that.
And that's it for questions.
That's it. Okay. Well, let's just reflect back to the goals of the webinar. What we tried to accomplish. We wanted to introduce to you the whole rapid agile RAD approach. We wanted to share some key principles with you so that you can accelerate your planning and execution process. And we wanted to introduce some useful tools and techniques. In fact, we identified 6 of them for you. We hope that you found value in attending the webinar. Please feel to contact us. Here is our contact information. Most of you who are on this webinar know who we are and how to contact us, but there it is just in case. So listen, thanks very much for that one question. It was a great one. We're going to wrap up now. We're going to end at 11:45. So another on-time delivery by Focus Management. And behalf of all of us here, want to thank each of you for taking time out of your hectic day to be with us. Thanks again, everyone, and have a great day.